in the sense that if you didn't buy a membership, so this is all about buying a membership. You didn't buy a membership. You have no say over who is going to be the next candidate in the party that's going to run, which then comes back to me on if in fact we can't get a candidate running that with conscience I could vote for, then it's all done already. Like, I'm not going to just vote to vote.
Yeah.
And if we can actually put somebody in there that in good conscience I could vote for, then I'm done now. You know, I'm coming back to sort of ground floor to, you know, so we come back to this place of when I came to Canada 22 years ago. I'm in my 23rd year serving at Cedar Grove Baptist Church in Surrey. One of my initial objectives was I've got to understand Canada. You know, I've got to understand, how did this country come into being? How does it work? How does the government work? And so I actually began a significant pursuit. I began reading books. I began asking questions in particular about government. Who can help me understand the government and how it works? Because this is very confusing to me. So I thought, where do I begin? I begin with my own tribe. I begin with pastors. So I started literally asking pastors, hey, can you explain to me how this works? Because this is kind of, I find it, you know, I'm not very astute, and I would be very quick to say I'm not some big government guy, but I find this terribly confusing. And pastor after pastor told me they couldn't. I never had a pastor. I have never to this day had a pastor offer to explain to me how even the basic system works. You know, at some point I felt like, well, if you don't understand, why do I need to understand? I mean, if you're making it and you're doing fine and this is okay, then why do I need to understand? When it comes around time to vote, then I guess I'll just vote and encourage people to vote. But, you know, I mean, frankly, you have helped me understand more about how things work and how to actually use whatever God-given influence you have than anybody else. Okay, so I commend you for that. I appreciate it. I not only appreciate that, I appreciate your spirit in it. I appreciate your approach. You have remained consistent both in public and in private that you're not trying to push a partisan view.
Right.
And I respect that tremendously. You know, my thought, Doug, was to even start off potentially with the fact that we need to address that there's a lot of confusion, okay, and that people don't actually know how it works. And we'd like to just explain in a simple fashion why these next days are so critically important to the overall process.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
So now explain to me, so my understanding at this point would be that the Conservative Party is the only party right now that is working to actually elect a primary leader. Is that right or wrong?
Elizabeth May is stepping down, and
okay,
they are looking for a leader in their party. However, we're always, when we scan the horizon for opportunities, there's two things. Is we have to prioritize. Obviously, you just can't do everything at one time. You look at what's immediately in front of us always, and the degree of influence that that the activity is going to create. How much, what kind of an impact is it going to create? Right now, the reality in the Canadian political system is that the Canadian, or the Conservative Party of Canada leadership election process is what's happening right now. I mean, we are in it, we're on it, it's happening, we can't escape it. There's a timeline set by the party, and we're either in it or not. And so I really have not just spent any time at all focusing on things that are not immediately in front of me, when things like as important as this. The second thing is that if you look at the political reality here in Canada, the fact is that if we're looking at the two leadership race, the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race right now has a very, very high probability that whoever is elected as leader could become the next prime minister of Canada. Again, where do we spend our time? How do we exercise our influence with limited time, limited resources, while we focus on what's immediately in front of us and what is most likely to happen? So that's why we're doing what we're doing right now.
Okay, so let me come back then, and let's talk about these other questions. So, you know, first again, I was thinking if we could just start off with the fact of simply explaining the confusion over the whole membership thing and why people are thinking that you're buying votes, and that it has nothing to do with that. And so it would be some explanation. You know, I could see us starting it out with me, you know, me setting it up somewhat of what I've just said, of coming to
Yeah.
Canada, wanting to understand, et cetera, people not being clear about it. And then the reality that I found that people are not clear about it.
Right.
And one of the questions that one of my members raised to me, are people seeking to buy votes, and then turn it over to you to let you explain as succinctly as you can what the whole membership thing is about, right?
Right. Well, actually,
So,
why, since we're running record right now, why don't we just keep going?
you know, coming back to, and obviously, I do want to get to the conversation of the four pillars, okay, and why that approach is so important to this partisan conversation.
Right.
And then what, you know, what can one person do to impact the destiny of a nation? And I think your
Yeah.
conversation, a condensed conversation on influence, is where I would see that going, right?
Okay.
And how one person who's encouraging others to buy into the four pillar approach, and actually promote that with others to buy in, and how you can, you know, spread your influence, the four influences, right?
Hmm.
I think that's a brilliant conversation. The question again is trying to keep the essence of it into, you know, into maximum 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I think what we could end with is the link on the broader conversation, your conversation, not ours, yours, right?
Okay. No,
I
that
think
sounds
that's
great.
how we could do it.
That sounds great. And I think the best way to do that is if you lead us through, like lead us through the conversation. And you also, you know me, I mean, I could sit and probably talk for a lot longer than 5 minutes, right?
Not probably. The fifth conversation that I could see, and this is what I'm shocked by, Doug, is
Yeah.
that somebody sent me, and I don't know if I sent it to sent something to you on it, but somebody sent me how much money has been raised by the candidates so far,
Yeah.
and it's like chump change. Like, this is ridiculous. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me? Are we
Yeah.
serious about trying to elect somebody? Right? So I don't know. Am I missing the picture on this? Is there not money needed? Do we have people that even care? I mean, what's going on here? So I'm just trying to figure out where I even begin.
Well, if I can make a suggestion
Yeah,
there, there's,
please.
I have just found through my experience that if you don't just take a second to touch on why are we even having this
Yeah,
conversation,
why
kind
am
of
I even here?
open people's mind a bit.
Yeah,
And if and there is a reality about this whole conversation that we're having, that is foundational. I think it's sort of what we need to really understand about the conversation about leadership in a political party and who could become the prime minister, is that, like all political processes in all nations, in democratic nations, is that the individuals that are elected to make the decisions in civil government, the people are elected by those who show up. That's as simple as it is. Is
right.
is if you show up, you are engaged in that process, and those are the people that pick. If you don't show up, someone else will decide.
Yeah,
And that is what people seem to miss sometimes. Is, yes, we can answer all the questions about process and the complexities of this and
yeah,
questions on that, but if they don't get the, at the very least, why are we even talking about this?
yeah.
And the reality that the decision is of who is going to lead is going to be made by the people that show up, then it'll be tough for people to keep their minds open to hear any of that other stuff.
why is anybody going to listen to me talking about anything to do with politics when, again, most of them, by virtue of the fact that they're not involved, have no interest.
Yeah.
So I almost have to begin with an opening statement on the fact that, hey, I've never been political, and maybe you're not political, and maybe you don't want to even hear about anything political, okay? And so
That's good.
why am I coming to why do I want to talk about political things?
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out what would be the initial connection point, right? Because this isn't a political platform. People aren't interested in it. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I identify with you and you with me as quickly as possible?
Yeah, that's fantastic to be thinking that way, because again, you've only got the first 15, 20 seconds and they're on to something else if they don't think
Right. I'm identifying with the average person. They don't want to be involved. I'm trying to give them a reason for why they actually need to pay attention. And in particular, though, the whole emphasis right now, in my mind, is these next days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And so I almost have to, I have to make an extreme sort of statement to grab their attention.
Right.
And this is what I'm thinking. In the next days, a decision is going to be made that will essentially decide potentially who the next prime minister of Canada is.
That's a great statement, right?
Okay.
There. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
That is completely true.
And that's why over the next days, I'd like to share with you some things that I'm learning and have learned about the whole process and how this works. And I want to start this morning by clearing up some confusion.